Welcome to NFN Radio News, home of no-holds-barred commentary about the issues of our times, plus great weekly interviews with fascinating people. Some of them top experts in their field, others simply with interesting stories to tell. You'll never know who'll show up at NFN Radio News, the podcast brought to you by notfakenews.biz, the daily blog that leans just a little to the left. Now here's your host, Bob Gaddy, editor and publisher of Not Fake News.
Hey, thanks for joining us today on the NFN Radio News podcast. Today, Mark Bello and I are speaking with Jesus Eddie Campa, author of a new book, Unmasking Leadership, What They Don't Tell You. He's a former police chief who lectures frequently on leading through diversity. Well, we'll talk about those leadership topics, and we'll also tap into Eddie's background in law enforcement to get his view about the current debate over the need for police reform. Eddie Campbell was born and raised in El Paso, Texas. After 27 years of law enforcement experience, he retired from the public service and transitioned his experience and expertise into the private sector as a mentor, consultant, and sounding board. Eddie served as a chief deputy and chief of police on 2 different occasions throughout his career. As a result of his last tour in a city impacted by racial divisions, Eddie created and implemented the innovative No Colors, No Labels initiative. It was designed to remove the preconceived notion that the police were racially motivated. In 2017, Eddie was named Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Humanitarian of the Year by the NAACP. He's a leader who believes in diversity and that a workforce should mirror the community they serve. Eddie holds a master's in criminal justice and security administration and is currently working on a PhD in public service leadership. He's a strong supporter of leadership development, strategic planning, customer service, crisis communication, 21st century policing, and procedural justice. So welcome, Eddie. Great to have you with us today.
My pleasure.
We're with Mark Bello, and so you're going to get blindsided by both of us today. I hope that's
nice.
Hope that's okay with you.
Not my first rodeo, so I got it.
Okay. So why don't you tell us a little bit about your background, Eddie, and about the book you're working on or that you've done?
I spent 27 years in law enforcement. I've been the chief of police on 2 different occasions, a chief deputy. Was a state director for the state of Oklahoma. Most of my career was done here in Texas, and then that's the law enforcement side of it. But I'm also an adjunct professor, and I've taught at different universities, about 7 different universities. I'm currently teaching a couple of courses at the University of Texas at El Paso. I'm a business owner. I'm an entrepreneur. I run America's Best Strategic Security Group, and then I also run Leading Through Adversity, which is my leadership development company. And then, as you mentioned, I'm an author. I wrote a book which came out July 4th. It's called Unmasking Leadership: What They Don't Tell You. And basically, it's all the things that I have learned throughout the years that nobody prepared me for when I became a leader. Warning me about certain things, things that you didn't learn at the university or at leadership development. So that's pretty much my background. Married, have 3 beautiful kids, a beautiful wife, a 5-pound annoying Yorkie, and that's it.
Okay. Well, you're an African American guy. How did that affect your work as a police chief? Well, first of all, where did you serve as a police chief, and what were those communities like?
So I'm actually Hispanic. I'm actually Latino.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm just really dark from being out in the sun all the time.
My bad.
I'm glad you corrected him, because I said to myself, he's not. I'm pretty sure he's Hispanic.
My bad. I'm sorry.
No, but you know what? That's funny, because that leads me into the story I'm about to tell you. So,
okay.
So when So I've been a chief. I was the chief deputy. I spent 20 years in El Paso with the El Paso County Sheriff's Office. Worked my way up. up to the chief deputy position, which is the number 2 person in charge. I oversaw the law enforcement bureau. And then I went on to my second chief of police job was in East Texas, and in a community that was very racially motivated, very racially divided. I mean, that was right about the time Ferguson had happened and things like that, and about the Baltimore riots and all that. So I always joke around the fact that when they hired me, they couldn't hire another Caucasian police chief, and they were never going to hire an African American. So they settled for this little short caramel Mexican guy who wasn't too dark or too white. He was just the right fit. So I got hired on as the chief of police there to bridge the gap and change the culture. And that was a very interesting time frame in my career, to say the least. I mean, you could just imagine. And that led right into, things were going very well, into a certain political figure decided to jump into the spectrum and turned my being the first minority police chief of that community into a nightmare.
So being a leader in that kind of a situation with racial division and everything else, that was a tough challenge. So did that prompt you on your journey in the leadership development field?
It did. And I'll tell you why, because, I came from El Paso, Texas. We have about 1 million people in here. This next census is going to show we have about 1 million people. We're very diverse, socially, economically diverse. We have the very poor to the very rich. So we're all over the spectrum.
That's Beto O'Rourke country, right?
Yeah, that's Beto O'Rourke country, absolutely. And
okay.
And we've been we're pretty accepting. So when I went to this community of only 26,000 people, and found myself being a minority, and actually being involved in discrimination, being called the little greasy Mexican who thinks he's in charge, the spick that runs the police department and things like that. I was like, what the heck? So as time was going on and we were, moving on through the course of that time, it was very challenging for me because I had never been exposed to those situations. And I thought it was just really awkward. And I felt like I was alone. I had nobody to turn to, because, I would talk to colleagues and I would tell them, and they just kind of looked at me like I was crazy. Like they didn't really want to believe me, because they're like, oh, that sounds like an ABC sitcom. I'm not an ABC sitcom, an ABC movie of the week or something. So what I did is I took, that's where I went through the leadership development. I figured, I can't be the only guy going through this. And I don't want anybody else to have to go through this. So I started, basically a support group for leaders that were going through things like this. And I called it Leading Through Adversity. And little did I know that when I left that community after 3 years, basically because of the racial divide, the refusal of the police department to come on board and stuff, I ended up with a whole lot of clients who were going through the same thing I was going through. They felt like they were alone, but there was people out there who had, who were in a situation where they were trying to change the culture of the organization internally, from maybe being a corrupt organization to trying to do the right things, or they bring in, somebody from the outside to lead an organization that had a internal succession plan of the good old boy system, and had to change it around, and all of a sudden from them, and they didn't know who to turn to. So they would kind of turn. That's how we developed it. It's a really good program. It's more of a sounding board. And then we do a lot of leadership development. I was really excited. Just a couple of weeks ago, we did an executive search for a small township here in El Paso. We picked out their next police chief. That was pretty exciting. So,
Eddie, I wrote a book called Betrayal in Blue that talks about, you mentioned the Good Old Boys Network. The book I wrote referred to what you commonly call the blue wall. Is it true that cops are reluctant to charge other cops with criminal activity?
Well, it was historically, it's kind of funny because we joke around about how the Reagan asked Gorbachev to bring the wall down, and he brought it. And it's kind of what we're seeing in law enforcement now, is that now in law enforcement, it seems like everybody's out to point the finger at somebody and turn them in, whether it's legit or whether it's a setup job, just because everybody wants to move ahead in their career. You know what I'm saying? So it's kind of like that blue wall is no longer really there. And I'm glad it's no longer there, because, yeah, when I first started, yeah, absolutely, it was there. Police officers were reluctant to say anything. It was always like, oh, we didn't see anything,
Our audience cannot see you holding your hand over your head because this is audio only. But I'm an attorney, as you might know,
Mm-hmm.
and let's kill all the lawyers
Okay.
go all the way back to Shakespeare. We've been vilified for hundreds of years, so I know what you're talking about. In your community, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems to me that 5% of the community brings down 95% of the good cops out there. But how do you root out those who are inherently biased or bad, act upon these biases like a Derek Chauvin? How do you change the culture so that these kinds of incidents don't happen?
That's a really good question. And one of the questions that I've been trying to figure out all this time is that, I've always considered myself a guy that does the right thing because it's the right thing to do. I hold people accountable to the same standard I hold myself accountable. And for some strange reason, I always end up on the short end of the stick. People have a really warped sense of what leadership is. A lot of people think leadership is a popularity contest. And as far as how do you root them out, because the minute you root, and here's the funny thing, as a police chief, a lot of the times, the person that's doing the bad thing, like let's say the bad cop, just for lack of better words, is for some strange reason is usually the most popular guy on the force.
Mm-hmm.
And the minute you go after him, you become the villain. Even though you're going after him because he's part of that 5% that makes the rest of us look bad. How dare you do that? You're not a good leader anymore because how dare you go after Bob, who's been a great, so he goes a little bit on the rogue every once in a while, but he's just doing it to do the right thing. Like, okay. So now it becomes justified. And before you know it, that police chief is run out of town because all of a sudden the union gets involved. The rest of the officers get involved to protect that one bad apple. And you can never really root them out. So I've been asking myself that question forever.
You're describing the blue wall.
Yes and no. Yes and no. Because in the blue wall, when you talk about the blue wall, it's we didn't see anything, we didn't hear anything. Now it's like, yes, we agree with you that he's a bad apple, but he's doing it because it's the right thing to do because nobody else covers it. Does that make sense? See, like when the blue wall of silence, people when the blue wall or the code of silence was out there, it was kind of more like we didn't see anything, we never saw him do anything, we have no knowledge. Now, a lot of times people will say, well, yeah, he's a little rough on the edges, he's a little bit of a bad cop, but his intentions mean well, and he's popular, and we like him. So I see what you're saying. There is a similarity to it, but it's really different. Because now at least some people are actually saying, yeah, he's a bad person, a bad cop, but he means well. Does that make sense?
Yes. It still sounds like the blue wall to me, but
you know what? I'm going to go with you on that one. I guess you're right. I guess it's the same thing. I guess maybe it's just my naiveness and hoping that blue wall would fall down, and apparently it just doesn't.
Let me ask it a different way, because I understand what you're saying, but why not treat cops like anyone else? Cops, for instance, have this qualified immunity. Are you for or against that? And perhaps if we simply looked at the behavior of cops as we look at the behavior of criminals, we would solve the problem.
Well, you see,
it's not a question of a good cop or a bad cop. It's a question of, is your activity legal or is your activity illegal?
Right.
And you'd be treated like any other person who committed an illegal act.
Right. Well, so when you talk about qualified immunity, I mean, I've never really understood that. It's like, I agree with you 100%. I think we should all be held to the same level. If it's a crime, it's a crime, period. If you committed a crime, it's a crime. Why should we be treated any different? We're held to a higher standard. So why do we need qualified immunity? It was kind of like the same thing when with the unions. I paid my dues for 20 years at the sheriff's office, and I never used it once because I didn't get myself in trouble. I did the right thing, and then a couple of times when I got dragged into something because somebody else are like, oh, take your rep. And I'm like, why? I didn't do anything. What do I need a rep for? So yeah, I'm right there. I'm 100% with you. I think that, officers should not be treated any differently. And, it's the same thing. Like when we walked into a restaurant, a lot of the times they wanted to give us a free meal. I would always say no. And they're like, no, I'm here. But then what I would do is I would just leave the tip that included the tip plus what the meal cost, so I never really got a free ride, because you shouldn't treat me any different just because I wore a badge and a gun,
Right. You're absolutely right, though. If you're held to a higher standard, qualified immunity seems to reduce the standard, right?
Exactly. And that's why I don't understand it. I don't understand, I don't understand why a lot of officers, like, especially like New Mexico, they just got rid of qualified immunity in New Mexico for officers, and officers are leaving by the dozen. It's like, well, wait a minute. I mean, I understand what you're afraid of, but I don't think they really understand what qualified immunity really paints for them,
As a police officer with a gun, how do you stand on citizens with a gun and gun control?
We're going to take a quick break here, but when we come back, we'll get Eddie Campa's answer to that question.
Yeah, so that's a very interesting question. Me on the personal side, as Joe Blow citizen, hey, I love the Constitution. I agree with the constitutional amendments and stuff like that. But to be quite honest with you, I'm not an avid. I don't like guns. I don't have an infatuation with guns. I carried a gun because I was a police officer. So I just think that if you're going to have constitutional carry, like we just passed here in Texas, am I for it? Well, not really, but that's the new law, right? So we have to follow it and we have to abide by it. So I just ask that we have responsible gun owners, that gun owners get training, get education, learn how to use the gun, because I don't buy that argument that's always out there. Oh, the more friendly guns out there, the less the bad guns get to work. And I'm like, well, you know what? We had a shooting here in El Paso at Walmart where 23 people were killed and there was not one friendly gun in sight. So that argument is invalid. The only thing I ask is that, officers who are out there who are about to be faced with this constitutional carry come September 1st, if they just be even extra vigilant and be more aware, because I have a lot more people who are trigger happy, people who are going to go out there because the law says anybody can carry a gun, and it's on the honor system that if you have that you won't, but you're not going to follow the rules, right?
Easy access to automatic weapons, for instance, makes it more difficult for police officers, correct?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'll be the first guy to tell you, I don't know why anybody needs an automatic weapon or a semi-automatic weapon if you're not in the military. I mean, I get it. Everybody says, well, we're doing it to protect ourselves from a coup against the government. Never thought that would have ever happened until, what was that, January 6th? It's like, okay, but.
Yeah, And who launched that coup? Who launched that coup?
Exactly. The same nut jobs that support open carry.
Exactly. Yeah. Eddie, do you? Go ahead, Mark.
You get the next one, Bob. I want to talk to you about psychological issues. You mentioned El Paso and the shooting incident. Psychological issues play a huge role in these mass shooting incidents. I wrote a book called Betrayal High about a school shooting and a kid that was bullied mercilessly in school. You're looking at bullying and job stress and marital stress and economic stress and persecution complex and all kinds of things that lead into these kinds of events. Lots of issues to unpack. How do we solve that problem as a society, as a law enforcement official?
That's a really good question, and I wish I had the answer to that. But, as a police chief, one of the biggest issues that we had was, having to deal with the mentally ill. Is how do you deal with them? Historically, we have cut mental health studies and mental wellness funding by more than half. I mean, we've gotten rid of state centers. We've gotten rid of, psychiatric centers, and then they just turn them over to the police. Oh, the police will know what to do with them. Well, no, we arrest them, we put them in jail, and then a doctor comes in, sedates them, and they're under sedation forever until they get out, and then they're off their meds and they go back to having issues, right? And the stressors of society today, compounded with, for instance, 2020, what happened, and we're just going to allow everybody to carry weapons from now on and do this and do that. How do you address those issues? I don't know. I mean, other than having stricter background checks, putting up red flag identifiers that if you have suffered from some kind of mental health issue or anything like that, you shouldn't have a weapon. Domestic violence issues, you shouldn't have a weapon. I really don't know how we would solve that, because I think that politicians will ever find the middle ground to come to a consensus as to how we're going to deal with it. But I do think that we have to do everything possible to improve as a society how we deal with our mental health issues here in the United States.
Well, that was part of the big debate over defund the police. I mean, the Republicans used that slogan as a hit job on the Democrats, but what the Democrats really were saying was, let's use some resources for mental health and help our police departments deal with these people.
And it's funny that you mentioned that, because I have a real problem with the word defund. It's funny because it's schematics. I mean, defund, I have a problem with that, but if you say redirect, I don't have a problem with that. For instance, I've used this as an example many times. Back in 2015, when I was with El Paso SO, we got all of our officers mental health officers certified. We put them through an 80-hour mental health course, showed them how to deal with the mental ill and mental health episodes and things like that. Well, that came out of our budget. That wasn't something that came out of our training budget. And you say, well, let's defund the police and take their money that they use for mental health. It's like, well, we didn't have any money for mental health. We took that from our training budget. Now, there's other agencies like LA, New York, these large agencies who do actually have psychiatrists who actually respond to calls with the police department. Now, I don't think that those duties should be assigned to the police department. They should be assigned to, like, public safety or public service or public health. So if you've got money that's budgeted to budget those people at the police department, I have no problem with you redirecting that funds and taking it somewhere else, but keep us with the resources. You know what I'm saying? And so I just wish people would get off the whole defunding and just use the term redirect, because
sure. In fairness to the Republicans, though, it's the Democrats who use the phrase, and the Republicans, unfortunately, and to their discredit, jumped on it and made it much worse than it was intended to be.
Right.
It certainly should be reallocate, redistribute, make an effort in other areas other than just policing. An effort on, for instance, community policing. Make the police part of the people you see on the street and say hello to, rather than somebody who simply responds to a crime. So I think it's a red herring, but to a large degree, it's the Democrats' fault.
Well, it was stupid. I guess marketing. It was just stupid.
You made a comment earlier about we're in Beto or work country. I know Beto. I've sat down with Beto. He was one of our city council persons. And I really thought that he made the stupidest remark that totally ruined his political career, is by saying that he was going to go out and take everybody's guns.
Right.
Right. I don't agree with that. I don't think we should go out and take people's guns. I think we need to create a responsible gun ownership and responsible gun usage and things like that. But when you have people just trying to say what people want to hear as a rah-rah hearing, I think he really did a lot of damage to the Democratic Party by saying something like that.
I agree. You're a unique individual. You're a Hispanic gentleman, a minority, who reached the level of police chief. I'm wondering how you feel about bias, not just to the citizens that are policed, but in your police officer community. Do you feel that there's an inherent bias in the police officer community, both as to policing and as to advancing minorities in the police community?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'll be honest with you. I think that I've gotten a lot of opportunities to be a police chief, or it's funny because I always tell myself, I've been a finalist for some major cities across the nation. But you know what? I've got the experience, I've got the education. I'm about to graduate with a PhD. So I always say that I'm always the token Hispanic who checks all the boxes, but we're not going to hire him. So there is a lot of bias there. And then internally with the police officers, yeah, there's a lot of biases, especially with our own kind. I mean, I'll be the first guy to tell you that, when you see a Hispanic or a minority moving up the ranks, it's your other minorities who will try to do everything to keep you down, because I'll be honest with you. The people that have given me the opportunities, the people who have put me in positions of authority, they've all been Caucasian. And then is there an inherited bias amongst police and the people that they protect? Absolutely. I mean, let's just look at it this way. Okay. When a police officer is at the police academy, what color is the target that he's shooting at? They always tell you, shoot at the black, shoot in the black. The silhouette is black. Okay. Everything that's associated with the cartel, it's black, narco cartel, narco corridos, the Saint Jesus de la Rosa, whatever his name is, the cartel, it's black. Everything is associated with black or darkness or brown. So you're kind of actually pre-programming officers. There's actually a police department up in, I want to say it's in Denver. I can't remember where it was, but I want to say it was in Denver, who have actually changed their targets. Their silhouettes are now a orange color, because the orange stands out, and you shoot at this orange target as opposed to a black silhouette, or they no longer say, shoot in the black or shoot at the black. So you inherently pre-program officers to have that pre-bias already. So, but police officers, police agencies, police organizations, there's two things they hate. They hate the way things are, and then they hate change. So what happens? The status quo remains.
That is incredible. That idea of the target being black actually influencing the mentality of the police officers. I never would have thought that.
And I'm sure you're going to have somebody that's going to argue with me and say, that's not true. That's not true. Well, what do you mean it's not true? We're programming you to shoot at black, Black is bad, but black is good. Shoot in the black, stay in the black, shoot at the black. Okay. What am I going to do? I'll shoot at the black, shoot at the dark spot.
But I think that's true in society, though. Black is always bad and white is always good.
Yeah. And it's not, when I was in Marshall, I developed a program called No Colors, No Labels. And it was an initiative designed to remove the preconceived notion that the community had that were racially motivated. How did we do that? A lot of people criticize me for creating that program because they're like, well, you have to accept color. And I said, yeah, there's nothing wrong with accepting colors, but we shouldn't look at things by colors. Why do we associate white with good and black with black? I mean, with black with evil. There shouldn't be an association with that,
What prompted you to come up with that program?
Well, everything that was going on. I was hired there in Marshall to change the culture. And it was a very racially divided community. So when I met with the community and I met with the police officers and the police officers were 98% Caucasian.
Yeah.
And they were set in their ways. They were older officers, yet I was, the first minority, a younger officer with a different mentality. It was really hard trying to get those officers on board. And I'll be quite honest with you, I never got them on board, but I got the community on board and they followed it. We reduced crime by 20%. The community started coming out. The community was bonding together. The community was accepting of the police and stuff. And, it was basically what I did with No Colors, No Labels it was a cultural awareness education grassroots. We would host a monthly cultural awareness meal. So let's say like the first one we did was the African-American community. I got with the local business. They provided the traditional African-American food. We brought in lecturers from around the country who were experts on the African-American culture. We sat down, we broke bread, we talked, we educated people about the cultures, the beliefs, the things behind them. And we did that with every race that made up our culture. And a year later, you would not have recognized day one to a year later, people of color, people who were together. I'll tell you a quick story. We had a very rich Caucasian oil man that lived in that community. And the NAACP president was a female, a black female, elderly lady. They're about the same age, and they couldn't stand each other. You could never put those two in the same room. So sitting at the same table, eating. I had one of my city representatives come and says, "Eddie, do you know what you just did?" I said, "No, what did I do?" He says, "You just made hell freeze over." I said, "How did I do that?" They pointed at those two people, at the two individuals that I'm talking about, and they're like, "Hell just froze over because of that. That would have never happened. It was your program that did it." So when I hear people say that community-based policing doesn't work, that we have to go back out there to the rough and tough and tumbling good old John Wayne days of policing, that's BS. I've done it. I've seen it work. I've put it into play, and I know what can be done to change a culture and how to bring unity to a community if the police would just go out there and work with the community. You know?
I'd like to clarify your answer for a second, because I want to make sure I understood you. You said that certain people didn't buy into the program, but the community did.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if we're talking about a glass half empty story or a glass half full story. If you sell the project to the community, but you can't sell it to the policing community, have you sold the program, or are the police dragged in kicking and screaming, or are they now part of the program?
So funny that you say that. Exactly. And I always say that because when people ask me, tell us what your greatest success story is, it's that one. Tell us what your greatest failure was, it's that one. Because I couldn't get the officers to come on board. They came along kicking and screaming, but they had no choice because they had to show this outward image of coming along. I left, and guess what happened to all the programs, and guess where they're back at? Everything's back to the way it used to be. You know? So you're right. The glass is half empty and it's half full. My greatest success and my greatest failure.
Too bad. I listened to some of your own podcasts to prepare for this interview. Interesting stuff, by the way.
Thank you.
You had a guest on by the name of Todd Heiner, a police chief. Apparently, he's your mentor.
No, actually, I was his mentor.
Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah, so let me tell you what happened there. I was the Ector County Police Chief. That was my first police chief job, and when I left to take the job over at Marshall, I had worked with Todd. I had seen Todd, and he had wanted that he would follow me around. He was my number two. So when I left, they asked me who should we promote, and I said, you need to promote Todd Heiner. This guy gets it. He understands it. He's 100% on board with what we're doing. And you know what? They promoted him, and he's done a phenomenal job out there.
He suggested, though, during the podcast, and maybe I heard it wrong, and I'd like your opinion. He seemed to say that an open door policy by the judiciary that releases too many criminals that law enforcement arrests create a situation where you guys work so hard to arrest a criminal and they're given a free pass by the judge or the jury. I presume you're a fan of due process and the Constitution. Did I get that wrong, or did he?
So what?
Where do you stand on the issues of arresting versus convicting? And are judges a pain in the ass, or are they part of the solution?
Oh, well, that's the whole thing. Is that we have a system that is systematically broken. And you could say that about every system, right? The criminal justice system, education system, health services, everything. But what he was talking about is that during the time that we were there, the jail was full. The jail was completely full. There was no room for anybody. So what the DA and one of the district judges did is they just opened up the jail and let everybody out, gave everybody a free pass.
Wow.
To empty out the jail. So it turned into a revolving door. So it was like, okay, let's let all these guys go so we can bring in these other guys who haven't been in jail yet. It's their turn now.
Oh,
and we're like, wait a minute.
Oh, wow.
Where the hell does that make any sense? It's like, how about we release those with minor offenses like traffic citations? Okay, you know what? How about those with minor marijuana offenses? But we're letting out hardcore drug users. We're letting out, convicted felons, burglaries, rapists, this and that. It didn't make any sense. So that's what he was talking about. It was an open door, and he used the word open door because that's what the judges were calling it. They're saying we have to have an open door of judicial process going through, so everybody would get a fair chance of spending time in jail. If that makes any sense, because it still doesn't make any sense to me.
That's incredible. You have anything else, Mark?
I've got what I think is an interesting question. I'd love to hear Eddie's opinion on it. A cop is called out to handle two different incidents. They're exactly the same. The circumstances are identical. Only one incident involves a person of color, and the other incident involves a white guy. What is the likelihood that the two incidents will be handled exactly the same way?
It depends. It depends. If you have somebody with the mindset of like myself, the odds are pretty good. If you have the mindset, and it's funny that you just mentioned that, because about an hour and a half ago, before we started talking, my son is showing me a video. Okay, and he's showing me a video, and I'm gonna have him send it to me, and I'm gonna email it to you guys because I want you to see it. Because I was like, wait a minute, hold on a second. And let me set up the video for you. It's a police officer, a white police officer, a white older man, tall gentleman. You could tell he was obviously stoned on something, some crazy drug. The officer has his gun pointed at him directly. The guy is obviously being aggressive, approaching the officer, grabs a stick, threatens to swing it at him, threatens to jab him, but not one shot is fired. And it takes almost a minute of the officer backpedaling, talking and yelling at the guy before he ends up shooting him a total of 9 to 11 times. I can't remember if it was 9 or 11. And the individual falls, and the guy is still alive. Got shot 9 or 11 times with a .40 caliber. That's how high he was. Okay, you when I send you the video, you'll see how aggressive he was, his demeanor and everything. Had that person been brown or black, it would have never happened that way. The first time that guy picked up that stick, officers would have dropped him. The majority of officers. Okay. Now, I want everybody to understand that I'm not against cops. I'm a cop. I've been a cop. I'm always going to be a cop. I just do think that our mentality needs to change. Our training needs to change. Okay. We have, Sheriff Joe Clark, I believe is his name, from Milwaukee, or former Sheriff Joe Clark, the other day made a comment, maybe not the other day, but he made a comment a while back that said, it's not the police that need to be retrained, it's the citizens. Well, I'm going to sit here and tell you BS, okay? BS. We need to retrain and redefine the way we do things. Look, we're in a business where hands-on is hands-on when it's needed. It's unfortunate. It's the nature of the beast. You're going to have to use force when it needs to be used. But if we can train 18, 19, 20-year-old soldiers to be in Afghanistan, walking the streets while their enemies are walking around with guns and rocket launchers and they're not engaging, why can't we do that to our officers? Where are we failing? I think we are failing. And maybe it's the administrators that are failing the officers on the street who are failing the citizens out there. So how do we change that? I don't know. I'm trying to get to the bottom of it, but I don't know. I hope I answered your question.
Better leadership, Eddie. We got Eddie for president.
Well, and it's funny because I'll tell you what, my critics will tell you that I don't know the first thing about leadership, because I'm not in the business to be popular. I'm not in the business to be liked. I'm in the business to do what's right. And, I'll be the first guy to tell you, I'm not always right. But given the facts of what's presented to me, that's how I make my decisions. And I judge it on the facts, not on emotions or feelings, but on the facts. And sometimes we live just the way your news article, what fake news or you know what? I don't deal in fake news. I deal in facts. And in today's society, they're more concerned about selling newspapers, hearing an alternative fact as opposed to what reality is. And until we change that mindset, we're not going to get anywhere. And you can tell I get a little bit passionate about that.
There's certainly some truth to that. Last question for me, my favorite podcast question, and how I end all my podcasts is, what does the word justice mean to you?
Justice to me, I'm really a big fan of procedural justice. Justice is done when both sides have had the opportunity to be both heard equally and be treated with equity, when they're both treated in the same manner, regardless of the outcome. As long as you're treated fairly and equally, regardless of, if the facts show that I committed a crime and everything's there, and there's due process and justice, and I go to jail and justice is served. Now, the bad thing is that's a layman's term definition, because, if I did kill someone, has justice really been served for the family of the people that I killed? So justice is kind of like beauty. It's in the eye of the beholder.
What a wonderful answer.
Well, Eddie, I thank you so much for being with us on this podcast today. That we learned a whole lot. I know I did, and I hope our listeners did as well. So we thank you for joining us, and we wish you the best in all of your endeavors, especially with your leadership initiative and the work you're doing in law enforcement.
Awesome. Well, thank you.
What's the book called? What's the book called again?
Unmasking Leadership, What They Don't Tell You. You can get it on Amazon or at JesusEddieCampa.com.
And is there a website?
Yes, JesusEddieCampa.com is my website. You can buy the book there. If you buy it there, I'll autograph it, ship it out to you, or you can get it at Amazon. Just type in, go to Amazon and just type in Unmasking Leadership or Jesus Eddie Campa, and you can buy it directly from Amazon. Amazon will ship it to you overnight.
Wonderful. Keep up the good work. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
No, thank you.
Well, we need more police officers like Jesus Eddie Campa. You guys, we need to take a pause here for a quick message, but don't go away. I'll be right back with some closing remarks. Thanks, guys, for listening. I hope you enjoyed this podcast and that you'll come back on a regular basis. Longtime listeners know that we provide narrations of commentary, published almost every day on notfakenews.biz. But now we're also including newsmaker interviews, and we're going beyond the world of politics for those, presenting guests and topics that I hope you find interesting and enlightening, like this one about leadership and police reform with Eddie Campa. I'm thrilled that my old boss from Capitol Hill days, former Governor Jim Florio of New Jersey, is joining me on some of these interview shows, drawing on his distinguished career in politics and public policy. So that's just another reason for you to follow NFN Radio News, so you don't miss an episode. You never know who'll be showing up. Check out notfakenews.biz too, where you'll find new material just about every day by some excellent writers with perspectives on a whole range of topics. You can sign up as a member at notfakenews.biz. And of course, it's all free. Also, let your friends know about this podcast and about notfakenews.biz. Our goal is to be informative and entertaining as we comment on the latest developments in the news, with just a little lean to the left. Now, this is Bob Gaddy signing off for NFN Radio News and notfakenews.biz.